Welcome to episode 16 of the Haxton Knits podcast. My name's Deanna and I'm an American living in Okinawa, Japan. I'm a master knitter and all-around crafty person, and this week we have some Flash Your Stash, I have some Sock Madness updates, and we're going to revisit the Knits in Translation KAL. Let's get started. Start things off with a couple of announcements. We have the knits challenge yourself knit along make along going on over in my Ravelry group. That's going to run through the end of July, so if you are interested in participating, just pop over there, join the chatter thread, show us your finished objects as you get to them. I will give you updates on my progress with this make along later in the episode when we hit works in progress. And the purpose of this make along is really just to challenge yourself to pick up a new skill or try a new aspect of your craft that maybe you would normally go to your local yarn shop to learn how to do. We're embracing the not having access to all of our resources and using this time to look out for new resources on the internet or just take it upon ourselves to work on a new skill or project. And as always, all of my knit-alongs, works in progress, double dipping, any craft, they're all open for entry. All right, let's talk about what I'm wearing here. This is the Comfort Fade cardigan by Andrea Mowry. This is not a new project by any means. I have had it for a long time now. The yarn is Lolodidit in her solo base, and these are fingering weight singles. There's a lot of colors, so hold on. From lightest to darkest, let's see, lightest to darkest here. We have Ballerina, Gumball Head, Honeydukes, Polyjuice Potion, and Zoinks. And this sweater is 100% Instagram enabling inspired. I was just scrolling through and saw this fade pictured beautifully and just impulse buy, and now I have a very bright, very loud cardigan. This is, if you're familiar with the pattern, designed to be worn inside out with the reverse stockinette showing, and I love it. I do, but these this yarn, because it's a singles base, it is starting to pill, and I've noticed that when I wear this inside out, that pilling is a lot more obvious, and so I've taken to wearing it right side out, wrong side out, knit side out. Which makes my husband happy because he just can't get behind the reverse stockinette knitting. I don't know what it is. It's just not his jam, and every time I wear my sweater, he comments that it's inside out. So anyway, let's move on. That's not what we're here to talk about today. Let's move on to some finished objects. I have only one finished object for you this week, and it is not a cat bikini. It is not a hat. It is the Ripple Bralette pattern, and I knit this in Hedgehog Fibres Beach Bunny, which is this lighter color, and Tanis Fiber Arts Peacock, which is this nice, beautiful blue colorway. This is a bra. I know it looks like not a lot, and it is not blocked, and I'm not planning on blocking it. Of course, this is a heavily ribbed pattern, and the ribbing is pulling in, which is really what's providing all of your support when you wear this object. I did take some pictures to put on Instagram, which for me was a little bit strange. I never thought I would be putting myself in a bra to take pictures to post on the internet. But alas, I did. I did add a couple of inches to this pattern, so it is more like a crop top or a little bikini top than it is a bra. But absolutely love this pattern. You know, when I was trying to decide if I wanted to make one of these or not, and I went looking through all the Ravelry patterns, something I noticed time and time again was that everyone said they're going to knit another one, which is always a good sign when you see a pattern that as soon as you bind off, you want to make another one. You know it's going to be an excellent pattern. So that is, I'm kind of having the same thought here. I love this. It's entirely made out of scrap yarn left over from socks and other projects, and I absolutely enjoyed making it. So maybe, perhaps there will be another one of these in my future. I did want to talk a little bit about weaving in ends in ribbing. So a project like this, obviously it's designed to have a lot of stretch, and when I weave in ends, normally what I do is I weave in horizontally across the row using a duplicate stitch. And for a project like this, that might not be your best decision. So ribbing has a lot of give this way, and when you wear it, tends to be items or garments that need to stretch this way. And it can be really tricky to weave in ends in such a tension that you don't end up with either really pulled tight threads when this is stretched, or really loose and kind of sloppy looking threads when it's relaxed. And so when I am going to be knitting, weaving in ends in ribbing, I actually prefer to weave in ends vertically. And there's a specific place I like to weave in these ends. So let's flip this guy inside out. And of course, each of these rows that look like knitting, you will know on the front side are purl rows. And if you look at ribbing, purl rows tend to just sort of disappear. They sit behind the row of knitting and just kind of pull in and disappear. And I think that is the perfect place to weave in ends. So let me I'm just going to grab a little needle so I can demonstrate this here. So we are on the inside of this work, and I like to weave in ends along the row of knit stitches, which of course would be the purl stitches on the right side. And the way I do it is I actually just catch one leg of the V right at the transition between the knit and purl stitches. And I'll catch 1, 2, 3 in a row. Let's see if we can get you to see that well. Just like that. So I will go up several stitches straight up the row like that. I will usually go ahead and do maybe one duplicate stitch and then come straight back down the exact same way. So if you want to see how I catch these, swing around and keep catching a couple more of these. I hope you can see that. That might be a little bit tricky to see. But yeah, so that is just my my advice if you are going to be weaving in ends on heavily ribbed fabric, is to just go ahead and weave up and down instead of horizontally across the row to help preserve some of that stretch. I didn't do any modifications per se to this pattern. I think the only thing I did was initially I had just used a regular bind off for this back portion, and I found that that just wasn't stretchy enough for me, so I went back and did a tubular bind off. I knit the straps for as long as I thought I needed them and sewed them on, and almost immediately it became clear to me that those straps were going to grow way too much. So I am going to come back behind and unpick these straps and either just pull out a few, or I may crisscross these so that I have a little bit of a crossed back, and that would require a few more inches of strap. So that is it. That's my only finished object this week. I know it's really sad. I did, however, make up for it with all of the other crafting. So let me show you some of my works in progress. First on my list for works in progress this week is my contribution to our Challenge Yourself Make Along. I really hope to have this done and finished, but it just didn't happen. So here's what's kind of been happening. With all the coronavirus and all the things going on in the world, I was maintaining a very high level of anxiety. A level of anxiety that I knew I could not sustain for a very long time. And over the past week or so, that just sort of crashed. The anxiety broke, and in its place, I just had this sort of depressed, lay on the couch and do nothing all day feeling going on. As a result, it's been a few weeks more than average between me putting out episodes, and I just didn't want to pick up my knitting. So what do you do when you get into those knitting funks? You just accept it and put it down. And oddly enough, in its place, I picked up my cross stitching and I picked up some crochet. And I don't know what the difference is, why knitting was out and other hobbies were in, but they were for a few weeks. And so that explains my lack of progress on this particular project. But this is, doesn't look like anything like that, going to be a shirt. I did knit the sleeves, so these are just going to be kind of a little sleeve cap. The other sleeve is also knit but not yet attached. I'm in the process of sewing it on. So really all I have to do is sew these sleeve caps on, decide what I'm going to do for the bottom edge here. I'm thinking I'm just going to pick up and do an I-cord bind off all the way around and leave this just a little bit cropped. And then weave in ends and it'll be done. So hopefully next episode this project will be all done and I'll be able to take pictures with you. I love that this project is 100% scrap yarn. I mean, just everything in it is leftovers from projects, and so finding a way to use them up, I have just really been enjoying. So hopefully next week I'll have some finished objects for you to see there. So I mentioned that I put quite a lot of work and hours into my cross stitch, and this is what I have to show for it. That's correct. I am exactly 1/4 of a way through this never-ending cross stitch pattern by, oh gosh, who's this by? It's like the Golden Collection. Let's show you. Yeah, so I am exactly 1/4 of the way through this cross stitch pattern. I don't think I'm ever gonna finish it, but maybe, we'll see. This is the Gold Collection. It's called Northern Night. And my husband very kindly suggested that maybe I should just put a small frame around just this moose and say I did a good job and move on with my life. We'll see. It gave me some entertainment over the last couple of weeks and took way too many hours of work, but I'm just really excited to see this done. I am excited to move on to new portions of it. Like, look, I have this adorable little cabin and boat to do yet still, and I'm sure this aurora in the sky will be fun. I don't have anything more to say about that. It's cross stitch. Cross stitch is what I did for the last several weeks. I may not have done much knitting, but I did do an obscene amount of crochet since I saw you last. Now there's nothing special going on here. This is just, I'm alternating rows of single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. And the yarn is good old Red Heart. It's in the bright stripes, I believe is what this colorway is. And it was just a lovely mindless project to pick up and put a little bit of energy into. When I originally bought this yarn, I actually saw a pattern. The pattern was it was planned pooling granny square blanket is what it was called. And if you're familiar with planned pooling, the idea is if you have a colorway that has predictable repeats of color, meaning it follows a pattern and the repeats are all the same length, then you can work with that and purposely plan the way that your colors are going to line up. And when I saw the pattern, I thought that I had the same yarn that they were using in the pattern. It's a Red Heart neon colored striped yarn in these exact same colors, but theirs was a little bit different. This one that I have, the color repeats are really long. In order to do a planned pooling project with this particular colorway, I probably would have had to have done a really ginormous blanket, because as you can see, a lot of these colorways go all the way across the row once, twice, sometimes 3 times. And so in order to make a planned pooling effect, it just wasn't going to work with this particular colorway. So I gave it up and just, you know, have been sort of mindlessly knitting away on crochet. Knitting away. You know my vernacular here. I must admit I am a beginner crocheter and I don't always know what to do when I reach the end of the rows. And so I end up increasing. Every time I get to the end of the row, I end up making one extra stitch somehow. And so as a result, the one end of my crochet is wider than the other. So that's fun and exciting. This is the type of a project where I can see myself working just diligently on it for a while and then getting bored and tucking it away. So hopefully I can just push through on that little wave of crochet mojo magic and get this blanket done. It won't be anything special, but I love Red Heart for blankets because it washes so well and it wears really well. And you know, it's just an item that you can keep around for a really long time because it holds up really nicely. Speaking of planned pooling, I actually have a couple of balls of yarn that are specifically designed for planned pooling knitting. I'm making a mess here. So these yarns are actually dyed. They're called Peacock dyed yarns, and they are specifically designed to have predictable color repeats of the same length so that you can do planned pooling. If planned pooling is something you're interested in doing, I recommend going to check out a calculator used for that. I like plannedpooling.com. So with that calculator, what you'll do is you'll knit a test swatch. And on that test swatch, what you want to do is count how many stitches you make in each color as you move through the repeats. And then you can just plug in how many colors you have and how many stitches wide their repeats are. And then adjust how many stitches you cast on for whether you're knitting flat or in the round. And as you adjust 1 or 2 stitches bigger or smaller, what you'll see is that different patterns will emerge in the way your planned pooling lines up. So really cool. I've had these in my stash for way too long, so I don't know what I'm gonna do with them. I used a little bit of this one for my Airy pullover, which you guys have seen on previous episodes. What you may have noticed is that this week I have no works in progress or finished objects of the sock nature. And what does that mean? It means that I am out of sock madness. So there is a new round going on right now, but the last round that I was in, 10 group members went into it. That was how many were left on my team at the start of the round, and 5 advanced. So I just didn't knit fast enough to advance to the next round. All 5 of those spots went away pretty quickly, and that means that I am officially out as a competitor for Sock Madness. And now I'm a cheerleader. So cheerleaders still continue to get the patterns and are welcome to knit them and participate, but you are no longer eligible to be a winner. I don't really know what that means because cheerleaders can still win prizes and things like that. In fact, I was notified that I'm going to win a prize. One of the days that I was at work, I actually finished my competitor socks during my lunch break at work and photographed them in the break room at work. And somebody thought that was humorous or entertaining, and so I was eligible to win a prize for that. A lot of the Sock Madness prize winners are for things like that. So if you bring your knitting with you to funny or unusual places, say you are knitting your final sock while you're in labor with your firstborn child. I think that's happened before. So the round that I went out on, the pattern was called Mobius Madness by Euler. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And it starts with casting on a Mobius, which is something I have never done. A Mobius is a piece of yarn that is twisted on itself when it forms a loop. And you know, you can cheat and do it by knitting a flat tube and twisting it and plugging it together, but that is not how this one was made. This one you actually do a Mobius style cast on, and somehow that makes you knit a Mobius. You know, I don't understand it. I don't do geometry, but I did cast mine on. I will admit I only got a little bit through the first sock and lost some steam on it. I suspect that if I had pushed really hard and been really motivated, I may have gotten through that round, but I already kind of explained to you, I wasn't in that headspace. I wasn't prioritizing the knitting on the socks for this internet competition at that time. So I was actually pretty relieved when all the spots filled up, and I did end up frogging my progress so that I could salvage the yarn for other projects. The yarn that I used was the Lemonade Shop sock pattern, and I absolutely love the yarn, so I didn't want to leave it, you know, a work in progress for a sock that I didn't absolutely love. So that's what's going on with Sock Madness. Now, the competitors who made it through that round are currently in the next round. So I'm rooting for my fellow team members. And the next round, Socks, is the, oh, I can't pronounce this. It's Lampropeltis? I will put that name over here in the window for you to check out. And it is a 3-color slip stitch patterned sock. It's really beautiful. I do think I may knit that one a little bit later. I don't actually have any really nice solid colored sock yarns, and I think those are going to be necessary for this pattern. It's such a busy pattern that if you have any sort of variegation or speckles, that they're just going to be, the pattern will get lost. So that will be for another time, but I am looking forward to working on that pattern. And of course, that means that the last round, so the round that's currently going on, those 5 competitors in my team are going to whittle down to 1. So the first person to finish will be the finisher for our team. The next round, the fastest from all of the teams go against each other. And the I mentioned before, they give you the specs for all the patterns that are going to drop at the start of the game, and they don't tell you what order they're going to drop in. But as a process of elimination, since there's only 1 round left, we know the last pattern is going to be the one with the beads in it. So it said it had about 120 beads, and they all had to be the same color. And I have to say I'm relieved that this pattern didn't happen earlier in the round, because I don't really like knitting beads and socks together, and all of my pretty beads I would rather put into something else like a shawl. So yeah, that's what's going on with Sock Madness right now. You guys can just stand by for the winning rounds, and shortly after Sock Madness is complete, all of the patterns that I've been talking about will become available. I don't know, some of them will be paid, some of them will be free. I'm not really sure how the designers will work that out. But yeah, stand by for the last round of Sock Madness. And I always like to put up stats about how long that last round takes, because it's always amazing to me. I feel like last year it was like 12 or 14 hours from the time the pattern dropped till the first finisher. So that's amazing to me. For me, it takes me 12 or 14 hours to do almost 1 whole sock. So to get a pair of socks done in that time is just astounding. It makes me want to work on my speed of knitting, which is actually something I've been kind of working on. I don't know if you know this, but for this guy here, I was practicing my lever knitting when I was doing these seed stitch edges, which perhaps is not the best material to practice lever knitting in. So if you saw any of my older episodes where I had the really long knitting needles, that's because I was tucking them under my arm to practice that style of knitting in hopes that maybe one day I'll be a faster knitter than I currently am. So that is it for Sock Madness updates. That is it for works in progress. Let's flash my stash. For those of you who aren't familiar, Flash Your Stash happens over on one of the big 6 forums over on Ravelry. So the yarn forum, every year they do a Flash Your Stash where you lay out all of your yarn and take pictures of it and share it in all its glory for all your fellow Ravelry members to view. There's something so nice about looking at other people's yarn. I don't know if it's like justification for me. So when I see someone with a really large stash of yarn, you're just like, yeah, I have a really reasonable amount of yarn. It's not unreasonable at all. And then when you see someone with like a very small stash of yarn, you're like, how do people knit for years and years and years and not acquire yarn? For me, the real yarn acquisition phase started a little bit later in my knitting career. I want to say it really got bad around the time I started going to yarn festivals. There's something about giving yourself permission to buy yarn that just like opens the floodgates, I think. I remember specifically I was getting ready to go to Stitches United in Connecticut, which was my first ever yarn festival that I was going to, and I was going by myself. I originally had a friend who was planning to meet me there, but her flights got snowed in. The weather was really bad where she was, and so I ended up going there myself, and I had brought myself a very large budget for yarn. and I did blow that budget and go over it, so I spent even more than I planned on for yarn. And it's funny because actually that's where these guys came from. We talked about that. But it was just funny because after buying all that yarn, you would think, okay, I just spent too much money on yarn, I need to stop. But somehow it's like I have previously given myself permission to splurge on yarn, so now it's easier for me to splurge on more yarn. And then I learned that I was coming back to Okinawa, where I knew from experience there weren't a lot of yarn shops, and I was gonna have to be shipping and buying yarn if I wanted any. That gave me even more permission. Like, oh, I'm going to be, you know, in this yarn desert for a few years, so I have to stock up. Obviously I have to stock up. So my yarn stash definitely has grown over the last couple of years, but I would say it's a relatively modest yarn stash. Relatively? We'll see. We'll let the viewers decide. So what I did was I gathered up all the yarn in the house. My husband actually made me some really cute standing shelves to store my yarn on. And at our last house, I did have them all in there. And then when I got here, somehow it all got spread out amongst different rooms in the house. And so I took this as an opportunity to gather up all the yarn, all the whips, all the long lost projects, and dump them all on the floor. And in person, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is so much yarn. And then as I looked at the pictures, I was like, oh no, it's not too much. It's a really normal amount of yarn, I'm sure. So I dumped all the yarn on the floor, as you will be seeing pictures here, and I sorted all the yarn by the shape of the yarn ball. So if it came in nice little skeins, I had wound it into cakes, or if it came in sort of this shape, they all got separated in that fashion, and then that made it easier to stack and store them. And then I just went ahead and took some pictures of them all finished up and shoved in their cubbies where they belong. And I admit, after seeing them all shoved in the cubbies, I felt like I had way too much yarn again. And it was really nice though, because it reminded me what I had and sort of inspired me to start making all the things that I bought this yarn for. And so something I did was I went and updated my Ravelry queue to include projects that I already own the yarn for, so that hopefully I'll go ahead and start knitting some of those things. I don't usually use the queue on Ravelry because what I find is it just fills up and I never knit the things. So I usually put everything in my favorites. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. But I do have some acquisitions to show you. I know. So here in Okinawa, we've actually been 28 days of 0 coronavirus cases, which is super exciting. Basically, it means until someone flies onto this island with the bug again, we'll have a little bit of a break from new cases, hopefully, since we're well past that incubation period. As a result, a lot of the stores and restaurants are starting to open back up again. Most of them are still doing takeout only or masks. So I used the opportunity to go ahead and stock up on some more yarn because I needed it, right? No. No, this is definitely not necessity shopping, and I understand that other parts of the world, you guys still are not in a place where it may be safe or a good idea to go out and yarn shop. So hopefully all of you are making decisions that are appropriate for the area you live and the situations that you are in at the time. But this is some of my purchases this week. I went and bought the Worcester Nostalgic Tweed. So one of the craft stores near me, the only thing they sell is this brand. It's the Worcester brand, which is a Japanese yarn brand. It's kind of like a big box. It's like a Hobby Lobby or Michael's. It's the type of yarn that you would find there. So it's not like a hand-dyed or indie yarn. This one, let's see how my Japanese skills are doing, so it's 80% wool and 20% nylon. It's amazing how fast you can learn to read things when they're things you're interested in. And it calls for a size 11 Japanese knitting needle. So a size 11 needle, let's think about this. So I think it's a 5.4 millimeter or roughly a US size 9 needle. And I'm planning on using this for the page 4 pullover. So I've showed you this a few times. This is a knitting magazine that's published here in Japan called Knit Marche. And the pattern is for this lovely sweater. Here. So I showed you this when I was talking a few episodes back about the Knits in Translation knit along. That was being hosted by Melissa of Knitting the Stash. And I had originally been holding out to knit this particular pattern until after my trip to Tokyo, where I was hoping to buy some local indie yarn, local Japanese yarn for this pattern. Obviously that trip got canceled, so I just had to accept that I was no longer going to be able to do that, and so instead I just went out and bought this. So this yarn is just a lovely tweedy yarn. It is gold with flecks of red and blue and cream and black. Just a really nice yarn. I'm going to enjoy knitting this up. I am going to knit this as a short sleeve pattern, and I think it's actually kind of interesting because the body of the sweater is lined with a 2x2 rib, and so if I just drop the sleeves off of here, I think it'll work out just fine. And of course, as most Japanese patterns are, this is completely charted, so all you have is a chart and no written instructions, so that should be fun and make it a little bit easier for me to tackle that project. While I was there, I also bought, this is Olympus Makemake socks. So these are another Japanese brand. And I'm kind of surprised. So it said Makemake socks, and I was like, oh cool, sock yarn. But these are singles. They're not plied. And so I went online. I'm pretty sure it's 100% acrylic. Let's see. Nope, 70% wool. 30% nylon. Interesting. But yeah, a single spun. They come in little 25-gram balls. And then when I went on to Ravelry, there were tons of people who had made socks out of them. So we'll give it a shot. If they don't turn out nice, maybe I'll make some baby socks. Or maybe I'll give them away. We'll see. I bought way too many of these, by the way. I was kind of thinking that maybe I would use them to make the Shift Cowl by Andrea Mowry. I've talked about that before. So I was thinking of combining these guys to make that. We'll see. We'll see if it turns out to be that or something else, but they were super cheap. These ones are 450 yen, so with the conversion, right around $4 a ball. Very affordable and will be fun to experiment with. I do have one more acquisition for you, and I'm really excited about this one. So I mentioned a few weeks back that I'm participating in the Amiri Yarn Club. If you are participating and have not received yours yet, please look away because I'm going to spoil all your fun. So the Amiri Yarn Club, it's 3 months, so I think it's May, July, and September you'll receive them. And I made some predictions when I was reviewing this before that I thought that 1 month I would get a sock pattern and some sock yarn. And 1 month I predicted that I would get a plant-based fiber. And that's because one of the designers that she featured described herself as a plant-based designer. So I thought maybe we'll get a pattern and yarn that were not wool. And I think we'll get a sweater pattern, and who knows, maybe a sweater quantity of yarn. It was a little bit of a pricier club, so if I'm only getting one skein of yarn and one pattern, I think that will be a little bit odd. But true to my predictions, the first installment was a sock pattern and sock yarn. So I'm very excited to show you. Let me show you the pattern first. So the pattern that came is Cinnamon by Yuka. This is here, just a beautiful pair of socks, and I do love knitting socks. The yarn that came with this, so this yarn is Mobinoki yarn, and here it is. So Mobinoki yarn brand, the designer is living in Germany, but I believe she is Japanese in origin. This is their fin wool base, and you could tell as soon as you touch it that it is not a superwash yarn. It is very sheepy and rustic. I think this would be glorious in some color work. Like, I would love to buy a bunch of these and do a color work yoked sweater. I don't think that I'm personally going to use these for yarn because they are going to be hand wash only, and that's just not my jam for hand knit socks. Everyone's going to be different about what amount of work and effort they want to take in maintaining their knitwear. But for me, socks get washed in the machine and laid dry, flat to dry. So for me, I just wouldn't risk ruining this yarn by putting them in the wash. So something else. This will be something else. Like I said, it's very soft, but definitely feels like a sheepy woolly yarn. I would have, like, if I had closed my eyes and touched it, I would have guessed that it was a woolen spun yarn, but it is not. It looks like it's worsted or semi-worsted. And I'm so excited to be talking about this with you guys finally, because it means I can undo this beautiful skein and touch it and squish it. I never managed to get these guys back into nice skeins of yarn when they return. You can tell that there's going to be like some tonal variegations here. I, of course, signed up for the night version. This club, you had the option of day or night for your color inspirations. And this, it came with a little letter, and it said if you chose the day scheme, you're going to find a color inspired by the brilliant sun on a summer day in Finland, a warm yellow base with touches of orange, gold, yellow, and brown. If you chose night, your color was inspired by the moon on a winter's night and the way it softly illuminates the sky and forest, a metallic gray base with touches of blue, purple, and navy. In the skein, the yarn appears to be semi-solid, but knitting will reveal gentle shifts and changes the way only hand-dyed yarns can do. So super excited. I would love to see the day base also. I definitely love this yarn, and maybe this yarn would be a nice pair with some of my hand spun yarn. Maybe instead of using that crazy sock yarn for the shift cowl, I'll use this instead. So we shall see what this becomes. But for now, I'm just enjoying squishing it and showing it off, and I'm super excited to see what the next installations may be in this yarn club. All right, guys, what's the secret? Tell me the secret. I know you twist it and twist it and twist it, and then let it twist on itself. But then I always end up with like this. I never get that like nice, super tightly twisted yarn ever again. Someone will have to educate me. Normally this is where I'd be moving into the Life in Okinawa segment, but coming out of this long pandemic lockdown, I don't actually have anything to offer for you. I've been spending a significant amount of time on my couch doing my crafting and generally feeling like a lazy person. I mentioned a few episodes back that I'd been having some problems with my shoulder, and those continued to get worse and worse and worse, likely from trying to work out at home, lots of push-ups, lots of arm balances. So I did end up going and getting some steroid injections into that shoulder, so now it's feeling a lot better, although certainly not 100%. So I think that sort of having a lot of pain in my shoulder, kind of being stuck inside, not being able to work out, just really left me in this blasé, lay on the couch kind of mood. So hopefully now I am having less pain and these restrictions are starting to lift a little bit. I may have some new segments for you and a little bit more motivation to get out and film things. We have opened back up the beaches and public parks, so I'm thinking one of my next days off I may try to drive out to one of the more remote beaches. We have a beach here that's a glass beach. I know there are different parts of the world where this happens, where the way the tides work, various bits of glass end up being thrown out of the ocean and onto the beach, and you can go and pick through the sand and find all this worn smooth bits of glass. So maybe I will go check that out, and I'll have to compare and contrast because I visited a glass beach in California when I was driving through on my road trip. I guess that was last year now. So hopefully some new things for you. My husband and I are daydreaming about when this whole pandemic is over, where we're going to go visit. I'll be interested to see if the Edinburgh Yarn Festival starts up again. I don't know if I'm ever going to get to that, guys. I feel like the world works against me. I've been trying to go to that festival for a few years, and it just keeps happening where things happen at the last minute at work and I'm not able to go. So hopefully some of these future episodes I'll have some much more exciting life in Okinawa updates for you. For now, that's all I got for you. If you want to see more about my group or join in the chatter, you can visit me over at the Haxton Knits Ravelry group. As always, you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Haxton Knits. Have a great day, guys.